Well, I, for one, was very pleased to find out where Plymouth is, and also to find out there's a gin distillery, so I will have no difficulty selling it to my colleagues next year. So that's all very good. Look, I'm going to basically do a case study of what we're doing in this particular area. My background is not as an academic. I started in teacher education many years ago, but I spent a large part of my career actually working in publishing in the corporate sector, and came back into academia and did my PhD in my early 40s. I'm not going to say how old I am at this stage for obvious reasons, but I've been doing it for a while, and part of my responsibility is I'm the CEO of a pathway college that is part of the University of Western Sydney. And you're probably thinking, why do I have that title? Well, the reason that I have that title is most pathways colleges, which is one of the main ways we are managing widening participation in Australia, are actually not-for-profit companies. They're charities, and they come under the company's legislation. And they've been quite deliberately set up that way for two reasons. One is to manage risk, but also to enable us to implement ideas quickly and to take advantage of opportunities, because our governance structure is one of a board that has representatives from the university and external representatives that are there mainly to deal with the issue of conflict of interest. But it means if we see an opportunity and we want to do something, or we have a new idea, as we do at the moment, about something I'm going to talk to you about, I don't have to spend 6 to 12 months going through university processes. I can in actual fact go to my board, and I have a broader memorandum of understanding and service level agreements with the university that enable me to implement something in, say, 6 weeks to 3 months that, were I a school of the university, could take me a year. So I consider that quite advantageous. So also, to being a CEO, I'm going to subject you to some very heavy PowerPoint slides, because that's what we do. Okay, so first of all, I thought it might be helpful just to talk to you about the Australian government context. We have a Welsh-born Prime Minister at the moment, which you may or may not know, who previously in the coalition, I can see the Welsh contingent here, was the opposition Minister for Education, has an extraordinary commitment to education. Now, she oversaw part of a major review in Australia recently, which we call the Bradley Review, and the whole purpose and outcomes of the Bradley Review was to focus on increasing participation, particularly by underrepresented groups. So you can see some of the aims. There are 40% of the population to have a degree by 2025, and 20% of university students to be low. SES in our terminology is socio-economic status. Now, we have a pretty crude instrument for measuring that. It's basically by postcode, which is income. And we'd like to see that, refined a lot more. I'm proud to say at my university we've already passed that. We have 25% participation of low SES. And everybody's coming and knocking on our doors and saying, well, how and why. We've also got the interesting situation where there is no limit on the number of university places. It's demand driven, so if they turn up and enrol, they'll be funded. But we also have a precarious government scenario too as well. So what's happened in the last 2 to 3 years, knowing this was coming, universities over-enrolled significantly and funded those students. But there is an awareness that, we could have a change of government in 18 months' time, and a lot of that will be clawed back. What was interesting was when this was introduced this year, the actual increase in enrolment over 2011 was only 2.5%. So there wasn't suddenly a whole lot of people knocking on the door saying, okay, now we have this demand-driven system, we want access to university. Didn't actually happen, and there are a multiplicity of reasons for that. And one of them's not, I think, not insignificantly, just the nature of our economy at the moment, particularly the boom in the mining industry. And you can leave school and get a truck driving licence and go to northwest Western Australia and earn $100,000 a year. So, people are deferring education, doing different things. And also, too, one of the things that Julia has initiated too is a significant increase in research funding. So this is what our funding situation is looking like at the moment. Remembering we're talking about the Australian dollar here, not the pound. I think we're about 60% or something at the moment. So this is the commitment of our current government's funding to teaching and learning research. We'll focus on science. Like most developed economies, we have a situation where we don't have the bulk of students doing science that we would like to see, and there is a real focus on science as being the genesis of innovation. But you'll see there we also have 168 million set aside for low socioeconomic students. And so, clearly that's all about widening participation. And a real commitment to do that. But what is really interesting with what's happening in Australia here is this government is not saying individual institutions are going to get money for grants for low SES students, though they do. What they're doing is for actively encouraging us to get together as groups and partners, particularly universities with similar profiles, and put in submissions together to have joint initiatives where we move students around and we cooperate to get widening participation. Okay, and also what comes with all this additional funding, of course, is greater regulation and oversight. So we're all required now to have compacts with government where we actually agree what it is we're going to do, and we have targets and objectives, and the universities are actually given a whole lot of business language around these agreements. And it is not unusual now in the Chancellery to hear them talk about KPIs as if they grew up with them, even though they're relatively new. And so it's set very much to performance funding. And what is really interesting in our context is the newer universities like my own, and the universities that are probably most involved in widening participation, are the ones that are most dependent on government funding. So in the case of my institution, for example, 85% of our funding actually comes from the government. Whereas if you look at, for example, our oldest established university, what we call our Sandstones University of Sydney, it is probably around 35 to 40% maximum. So that has a significant impact too on how we behave and who we partner with and what we do. Okay, so this is me. New Generation University. We were established out of 3 colleges of what we call colleges of advanced education that were responsible basically for producing our nurses and our teachers and general courses in businesses and so on. And they were sort of changed in reforms that we had in the 70s and 80s. So we call ourselves a New Generation University. We have 36,000 students, and we're aiming by 2015 to grow to 50,000 students. And that our economic contribution there is quite significant because we're all across the whole of Western Sydney. Now, most of you probably think about Sydney in terms of being that bit on the right-hand side of the map here. The Opera House, the Harbour Bridge, Eastern Sydney, clutched around where Cook first came in there. What you can actually see in the blue spots are our main campuses, and the brown spots are the University of Western Sydney College, for which I'm responsible for, and that's where we are, or where we are about to open in 2014. And a little bit about the tyranny of distance with Australia to actually get around our campus, as you can see there, 8,900 square kilometres we cover. Now, the interesting thing about Western Sydney was previous governments, before we had a Labor government in the 70s, just said Western Sydney doesn't need a university. It is where the working class live, it is where the migrant hostels are, and they've got plenty of TAFE colleges, and they can all get a trade. So there was a significant political push to actually give a university to Western Sydney, and I must say I'm very, very proud to be part of that legacy. And the major person responsible for that was Gough Whitlam, who was a significant Prime Minister for us and an agent of change in the 70s, and we also house his paper, probably best known internationally for the dismissal, you know, when we suddenly remembered the Queen was still our head of state. But you can see the challenges we've got there just from distance. Okay, look, I won't dwell too much on this, but the one thing I would say is we've just recently done a major survey of all of our staff, and we called it My Voice. which is a bit twee. But what was really nice about it is in the responses, 9% of our staff said they believe in the missions, the values and the strategy of our university. And I'm really, really proud and excited to be part of it, because what gets all of us out of bed in the morning, you know, we really are about change. Okay, but what we're also concerned about is participation rates, and I'll show you something that looks a little bit better than this. But if you harken back to that map I showed you before, Eastern Sydney, Northern Sydney, very, very strong, good, traditional middle-class areas with strong participation. Western Sydney, the participation in higher education, significantly less. Those figures are from the census and are a bit old. I'll show you this, which is probably easier to see. The dark bits are high levels of participation. So you can see the areas for which our university is responsible are definitely on the yellow side. And it's a bit difficult for you to see, but the yellow bits are 0 to 2% participation, and the very light orange is 2 to 4% participation in higher education. So you can see that's a significant challenge for us. But also what it means, now there's a lot of government funding around, is all of the Sydney University, what we call the city universities, which are where most of our universities are, they're within a couple of kilometres of the CBD, are all coming and knocking on our door saying, please help us with widening participation. We'll take your best and brightest. So what do we look like? Our students actually reflect our region. 50% are first in family, and you're probably, many of you are in a similar situation, but I'm actually a graduate of a city university, and I worked for many years in a city university, and when I went to my first graduation at the University of Western Sydney, I just cried. The way the families get involved is just absolutely astonishing, you know, because the background of many of the families, and they're so aspirational and they're so proud, and everybody comes. It's just really exciting. But what's interesting about us, unlike a lot of other universities, is a lot of people come from us with vocational qualification. So they've done some sort of trade course or first, and we're now up to something like 20%. I was very proud until I met John that we had 174 countries of birth, but, you know, I think you had 175, didn't you? Yeah, you beat me. But a big challenge for our students is they have to work too as well, you know, just to live. Sydney's a very expensive city, so they tend to work more than the national average of university students, and they're more likely to mix their classes because they've got a job. And as we've already had a look at the participation rates. Okay, I'm not going to talk a lot about any of this, but I just wanted to give you some sort of idea of some of the things that we do. You know, there's not time to go into it all. I'm going to talk mostly about the UWS College Model, because that's what I'm responsible for. But we do have very sophisticated articulation processes. We have extensive mentoring programs involving our students, and we do a lot of work with schools. And in the beginning, when we started doing schools engagement, we started with you know, our equivalent of your level O's. We're now down to year 3 in the primary school in terms of our school engagement, and actually we work very, very closely with the schools and the parents just in terms of building aspirations. And we start bringing students on very, very early in the piece onto our campuses. So, as you can see, direct projects with over 400 schools, and you know, what is important to us is the real focus on science and maths, environment, literacy, writing. I actually find I have a lot of students who come to me in the Pathways College who want to, for example, do engineering, do and construction management, things like that, and they have absolutely no background at all. They haven't had the right advice at school, they don't have maths, they don't have physics, and they're behind the 8 ball before they even come in. So the schools engagement piece is very important to us. Okay, yeah, just a little bit more detail. Now, if you're interested in any of this, you know, it will be available. But just to give you some idea of the extent of our engagement, And we also have an international panel at the moment just looking at our engagement strategy and trying to give us advice in terms of, how we can seek to expand our improvement even further. But our events are significant, and it's the nature of the community in Western Sydney too as well, that, very much the parents come, the teachers come, the students participate, that everybody engages in the event, because we have to make everybody feel comfortable about coming on to our campuses and feeling good about that experience. This is just the Skyping bit that you do. Plymouth had to go. I'll just have a quick one here. Our preferences are increasing. We were, I think, in the beginning, when the university was first formed, seen as not necessarily the institution of first choice if you were a top student. That has significantly changed over recent years. And we now, in terms of preferences this year, we were the second university in terms of first preferences in Sydney after the University of Sydney, which is quite significant. Our students are saying, you're our university, and we're not going to go past your door into the city, we're going to come and participate in your programs. Okay, and this is my bit to boast to as well, because I'm responsible for UWS College. I was employed by the university to come in and establish the UWS College, and it came out of a couple of antecedents that were pathways colleges. Now, traditionally in Australia, our pathways colleges were just for international students that came from Commonwealth jurisdictions who had either O-levels or they'd passed year 11, and they were basically building up their English and sort of moving on. In 2008, we decided to take the pedagogical model that we'd had for international students, because it succeeded, and start using it with domestic students who'd applied to go to university but didn't get in. And in the beginning, what actually happened, it was those students from the area who wanted to come, who we thought were capable. We moved into what we call a foundation program, which was a university program, or straight into first year, which we call a diploma program. So what we do at the college, we teach the first year curriculum in a whole areas of disciplines. And it's exactly the same curriculum, exactly the same assessment, except we teach it over 3 semesters, not 2. We teach it in groups of 20. We put the students in cohorts, and whatever subject they're in, they stay together as a group, so they form their particular networks. And then when they're finished with us, they move into the second year of their degree on one of our campuses. I should say, I think the secret of our model and why it's actually working is 50% of my staff I get from senior high schools. They're people who have Masters of Education usually. They're specialists in literacy and numeracy as well as discipline specialists. And their teaching is, and they're basically running the program and doing all the individual consulting and the strategic intervention with students. And they are then supplemented by academics from the university that I engage on a casual basis who are discipline specialists to do the lectures. But basically we use people out of the old school system to do the tutes and do a lot of the delivery. And we actually think that model is very significant in terms of our success, and that's what the students are saying to us too. They actually like that mix. Just giving you a little bit more information about how that works, and I mentioned that a bit, that we do a lot more face-to-face with them, and we find that they actually need it. But what is interesting for us now, we've got 4 years of data, so we've got 2 groups now who've gone through and completed their first degree, and the actual the transition and progression rates for students who've been through our Pathways College is actually better than students who are doing direct entry now, and we're very, very proud of that. And of course, you can see the outcome that I'm most proud about is that we've, at the beginning of this year, received an additional, and by we I mean UWS College, 26 million in government funding to extend the programs that we've got geographically. So we're very, very proud of that. Okay, this is just a little bit about how it works, and I mean none of this would be unfamiliar to you. Students can enter into our preparation program, which is our foundation studies program, or our diploma program, either from year 11, year 12, which is our matriculation year, or mature age entry, you know, and we look at RPL and prior learning and things like that. One thing we're about to introduce next semester, which we haven't done before, is students coming the other way. We haven't decided on the nomenclature yet. We're thinking about fresh start, but the university have approached us and said, look, we've got students, particularly in our business school, you know, who are failing most or all of their subjects, and what we'd like to do is transfer them back into you for a semester where you do academic skills development with them. They can then exit with a diploma, or they can come back into the university into second year. Not sure how that one's going to go, but we think it's a really good initiative and a really good idea, and it'll be very nice for us in terms of the diversity within our student group as well. So hopefully I'll send somebody to Plymouth to be able to tell you it was a great success. Just generally to let you know, we started off, we only had 2 diplomas, one in information technology and one in business. But the model has proved to be so successful that the university gave me permission then to offer an extensive range of programs. So now a student can come through a pathway with us and go into any course of study within the university. And, you know, that was the whole idea. And because we're a traditional Pathways College, obviously we still do migrant English and English language quite extensively. And we do a lot of transnational programs too, as well, in Africa and the Middle East, and that's mainly about, you know, building English capability. And we offer associate degrees now with industry partners in Western Sydney and the creative industries, and we're just starting with engineering. And the engineering one is really important to us because we're working with the power stations and the mines and places like that out the other side of the Blue Mountains, and that enables tradesmen in those areas to study while they're working, but also then to get affiliate status with Engineers Australia, which is their professional body, which is very, very important to them. All right, I'm conscious of the time. Just to let you know, okay, you know, what do we see as the challenges? It's scalability. You know, the problem about when you develop something that's a successful model and everybody says, let's go for it, you know, and the government showers you with money, there's always a downside to that. Too as well, and that's the big challenge for us, you know, making sure that we can keep the model workable and scalable, and just, you know, understanding you know, how we manage that in our two-speed economy, and also too, you know, the big problem for us in terms of what's happening in higher education is just attracting and retaining staff. And my deputy vice chancellor was in London last week, you know, trying to recruit 100 academic staff for us. That is a real challenge for Australian universities at the moment with the ageing of our population. So if any of you are interested in migrating, see me afterwards. Okay, and just finally, you know, a little bit of feedback from some of our students. So we've gone from being seen as, oh gee, I didn't get into uni, maybe I'll have a look at the Pathways College, to now for a lot of students being their first choice. And you know, that's phenomenal because they know, they can see the success. We use our students to come back as mentors, so it's you know, pretty positive and pretty nice. So sorry to throw such dense information at you, but you know, I wanted to get the layers of message across. I know we might be problematic for time, are we?
No.
Any questions?
Yeah, we can do questions.
Okay. So anybody have, yeah?
Okay, let's thank you first and then we'll do questions. So I think we've got a few minutes for some questions and points for Kerry. If you can say who you are and where you're from. Ross, Kerry, do you want to come and stand in? We can share the mic. I think Ross was first and then we'll go for Tony. Ross?
Thank you, Kerry. That was excellent to hear about your model having in the University of Western Sydney. The question I have is, was there much resistance from the TAF colleges and others to you setting up, or was it quite a welcoming thing to happen?
Very interesting question. The TAFE colleges now in New South Wales, where I am, have been allowed now to deliver undergraduate degrees in cooperation with universities, very similar to the model I think that you have here with your foundation degrees. So initially there was some concern that the Pathways colleges would take their students, but we work quite collaboratively with them now, and they are also in their areas of specialisation being able to grant undergraduate degrees.
Okay, I think Tony was next.
A distant relative, Kerry Hudson from University of East London. On one of your last slides you said about challenges, and very often mature learners are looking for new beginnings.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about the challenges of recruiting mature learners into your program?
Well, it's very much where do you start, and we started with the pool of mature age students that applied to the university and did not get entry. So we deliberately targeted them. We have their details, and we've literally done a phone campaign with them, talking to them about, well, you weren't successful about getting into the university. There's an opportunity for you to come through the college, but we're going to put a requirement up front that you do an initial literacy and numeracy assessment with us, and if you have any difficulty with that, then we'll put you through an intensive summer program before you actually start on your university study. And we're still working on that campaign at the moment, and we're getting very, very positive results.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Another question or comment? Or yeah, one here and then we go to Nick. Yeah.
Melda Byrne in UI Galway. You mentioned a huge number of teachers that were engaged in your schools programme. And I'm just wondering, did you face any challenges in terms of getting the teachers engaged in that?
Not at all. You don't work in a school in Western Sydney unless you're motivated to work in a school in Western Sydney. Absolutely fabulous support from the schools, and they are very, very aware that a significant part of what they have to do is build aspiration.
Thank you, Nick.
Nick Davey, Association of Colleges. Yeah, fantastic presentation, and a lot of which is very transferable, I would suggest, to the English situation. A simple question, really. You mentioned the mature students. In terms of the younger students, are there any kind of entry requirements? How do they get in?
Well, with the younger ones, they've usually had an attempt at matriculation, but they haven't got the result that they actually need. So in terms of our open access, that is focused on mature age students. Our school leavers have at least attempted matriculation before they come to the college.
And do they have to get some kind of score? Is that
yes, they do. They have to get a tertiary rank. And at the moment we're taking them at a minimum of between 40 and 45, and students that are doing less than that we actually refer back to TAFE. So we work collaboratively with TAFE on that level, because we think any less they can't do. The average entry score in Australia across the board would be around the 75s, and if you're doing law, medicine, you're in the 90 pluses across the board. So we are dealing with the significantly lower level academic achievers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Some more, probably 2 or 3 more if people are quick. Yeah. Name? Say name and where you're from.
Sorry, yeah. Karen Coursing from Yorkshire University. I just want to know what interest you get from that minority ethnic groups.
Look, I'm about the only Anglo-Celt at my college. It's nice for me to be in Ireland, I have to actually say, because I'm just realising all those songs and everything from our childhood that's so much part of Australian culture, actually Northern Ireland, which we never realised. Look, significantly, my staff are predominantly from ethnic backgrounds. You saw that Western Sydney is a source of migration, 174 nationalities amongst our students. I sort of looked at my staff because we do a staff survey every 12 months. I've got 33 different nationalities amongst my academic teaching staff too as well. So we've got diversity, and on the English side of what we do, we teach cultural diversity too as well. So there's very, very much engagement with the ethnic community, and like most sort of groups that migrate, particularly it's been a very, very positive experience for us. the bulk of the ethnic groups in Western Sydney are very, very aspirational about education, and those that aren't, we find them.
Okay, I think Daniel.
Daniel Khan, OCN, London. On your slide you talked about private companies becoming a lot more involved in the education scene. Can you just elaborate just a little on that?
I think that's a worldwide phenomenon. I mean, what's actually happened with, particularly in relation to the Pathways colleges, is a lot of people that were private providers of English language have moved in and made relationships with the universities to provide pathways, particularly for international, but increasingly for domestic fee-paying students too as well. And the progression and retention rates from those private providers are nowhere near what they are from university providers. And that's a significant concern, you know, because the private providers aren't too worried about them. They either get through and progress to first or second year at a public university, or they don't. And that's a real concern for our sector generally. There's some very reputable ones too as well. But most of the increase in provision in Australia in the last 2 years has come from private providers, but a lot of that has also been online, not in a blended learning or face-to-face scenario.
Okay, Ted?
Are there any...
Say where you are. Where you are and who you're from. You know what I mean?
That's the College of the Marshall Islands. Are there any FACE-like organizations in Australia that hold conferences or that bring together people interested in widening participation in that part of the world?
Not with the sort of formal structures and so on, but this is you know, something that we're all doing and talking about all of the time, and you know, everybody is creating sort of informal networks too as well. But you know, John came down and addressed that group last year, and you know, hopefully he'll come again soon.
Okay, right, it's a threat, I promise. Well, I think we've got one more question, and I want to be indulged and have a question as well. So we'll take one, and then we'll finish. Okay, I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hi there, Rose Ryan from NUI Maynooth. I'm just very interested in the progression of your students onto the University of Sydney, and I'm wondering, the tendency certainly in Ireland has been that while students will progress from diverse backgrounds, they tend not to progress in big numbers to the very prestigious courses, medicine, law, etc. And I'm wondering, has that happened organically, or have you had to actually intervene to make sure that happens?
What is really interesting with us is our students stick, you know, and we like to think that's part of the student experience, but there's also a part of me that thinks it's so bloody difficult to get around in Sydney in terms of our infrastructure. You know, we've got 4.5 million people across, you know, 9,000 square kilometres if you look at the whole particular area. But they do progress. Now, in terms of the prestigious areas, medicine and law, I actually find, and again, I've only got sort of just over 4 years of data with the college, but we're actually finding the bulk of our students, in excess of 70%, that come through the college have a specific vocational aim in mind. They want to do engineering, they want to do construction management, they want to do teaching, they want to do nursing. They want to actually be able to smell the job at the end. We have not had any of our students come through our Pathways College yet that have proceeded to medicine. We've had one who's proceeded to a combined degree in business law.
Okay, my indulgent question is, you've got 20 years experience of income contingent loans as a basis for student finance. We in England are just about to enter into that in a full sense. One of the great debates for people in widening participation and access work has been this notion of debt, fear of debt, which has almost kind of gone the other way, you know, that people are encouraged to not have a fear of debt, which seems to be a crazy position for us to be in given what else is happening in the world, but there we are. Experience of income contingent loans and debt and fear of debt for people from low-income families. What's the story there in about 3 seconds? Can you do that?
Well, you know, I don't have a lot of personal experience there, but I was just saying to John over dinner, you know, we over breakfast, we make a point of, when our students fail a subject, of counselling them about, you know, recognition that they are actually accumulating debt, but it hasn't been part of a significant part of the public debate. And one of the interesting things is I just read anecdotally something about this $3 billion worth of unclaimed HEX debt on the Australian government P&L at the moment, and they're all of our graduates who've gone overseas and are not residents for tax purposes because they're working in the globalised economy. What advice would I give my children?
Yeah.
Go to Europe.
Good advice as well, I think. Okay, we must thank Kerry before we go on to our workshop. Thank you very much.